The first time Maren Whitlock saw the Apache man, he was standing alone beside a burning ridge, his silhouette carved against a sky that color of dying embers, and he was staring straight at her as if he already knew her name. The evening wind whipped dust into spirals around her boots as Maren pulled her horse to a stop. The fire beyond the ridge crackled low, more smoke than flame. But something in the man's stillness made the entire horizon feel like it was holding its breath. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched her with a gaze that felt far too steady, too knowing, too heavy. Maren swallowed hard. "You lost?" The man didn't answer right away. His hair long, raven dark, fell over his shoulders in unbound waves. A single white feather was tied behind his right ear, charred at the tip as though it had been dipped in fire. His chest bore old, faint scars, half hidden beneath a buckskin vest stitched with turquoise beads. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried an aura of isolation so sharp it felt almost audible. When he did speak, his voice was low and rough-edged. "You shouldn't be riding alone." "Not tonight." It rattled her. She'd heard warnings before, from ranchers, from sheriffs, from every dusty-mouthed traveler who believed the West belonged to danger, but never delivered like that. Never so quiet. Never so certain. Why? She asked, forcing confidence to her tone. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Tracks behind you. 2 men, maybe more. Been following since last river bend." Maren's pulse jolted. She twisted in the saddle. Nothing but swirling dust and deepening dusk. No riders, no noise. Just the wind crawling across the plains like a restless animal. "You're sure?" She whispered. The Apache stepped forward, resting a hand on his hip close to the haft of a small stone axe hanging from his belt. "If you trust me, ride with me. If you don't, keep going and hope they change their minds." Those words shouldn't have comforted her, but strangely, they did. Maybe it was the calmness with which he said them. Maybe the quiet strength in his posture. Maybe the loneliness in his eyes that mirrored her own. Her husband had died 3 years ago. Her ranch had gone quiet. The nights had grown longer. The silence could swallow a soul whole out here. And this stranger, this man, looked like someone who understood silence better than most. She tightened her reins. "What's your name?" "Takoda." He paused, then added quietly, "It means friend to all, though few believe it." Maren offered a faint, weary smile. "I'm Maren Whitlock, and I'd like to trust you." Something softened in Takoda's expression, but only for a heartbeat. "Then follow me." He turned and began walking toward a hidden path that wound behind the burning ridge. Maren nudged her horse forward, the fading daylight stretching long shadows across the ground. The fire crackled behind them like a warning drum. "Why is that ridge burning?" she asked after a long silence. Takoda's jaw flexed. "Because someone wanted to erase tracks. Not yours, theirs." Maren's blood chilled. "What happened here?" "Trouble." He lifted his face toward the sky as if listening to something only he could hear. "But not yours to carry." "Not tonight." He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who belonged to the land, someone who could read every stone, every shift of the wind, every whisper of grass. The trail narrowed between tall basalt spires, turning the world into a corridor of shadow and fading warmth. "You live out this way?" she asked. "No one lives here," he answered. "Not by choice. So why are you here?" Takoda stopped. The wind died completely, as if waiting for his words. "I buried someone." Her breath caught. The pain in his voice wasn't loud, but it was deep enough to echo inside the stone canyon. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He nodded, though his eyes stayed ahead. "It was my niece. She didn't survive what came through this land." Riders with smoke in their eyes and fire in their hands. Maren's chest tightened. Did they hurt you too? His exhale was slow. They hurt my people. And they took something else. What did they take? Takoda's gaze flicked toward her, and for the first time she noticed something strange. His eyes weren't simply dark. They reflected firelight even when no fire was near. My peace. The path widened, opening into a small hollow shielded by towering boulders and gnarled juniper trees. A shallow stream trickled nearby, catching the last threads of twilight. Takoda gestured for her to dismount. We should wait here, he said. If those men come, the walls will protect you. And you? She asked. His expression didn't waver. I don't need protecting. A shiver ran along her spine, not of fear, but something more complicated, more curious. She climbed down, brushing dust from her skirt. Takoda crouched near the stream, dipping his fingers into the cold water. The muscles in his back moved beneath the leather vest like coiled strength. How long have they been following me? She asked. Long enough, he answered without looking up. They followed you because they think you saw something. Something you weren't supposed to see. Maren tried to think. She'd spent the day in town, traded supplies, checked the telegraph office. Nothing unusual. What could I have seen? She murmured. Takoda finally stood, turning to face her fully. Their eyes met and everything inside her stilled. I don't know, he said. But I know they won't quit. The world dimmed into twilight blue shadows. Coyotes howled in the distance. The air tasted sharper, colder. Then Takoda took a slow step toward her, close enough for her to smell the faint scent of pine and smoke in his hair. His voice dropped to a whisper. Maren, if night falls before they pass us, I may need to ask something of you. What? She breathed, her pulse thrumming. His eyes were unreadable dark, deep, ancient in a way she didn't understand. Will you stay with me tonight? Her lips parted, shock vibrating through her chest. Stay? With you? Yes, he said softly. Because if you leave my sight before dawn, I don't think I'll be able to protect you. Lightning didn't crack. Thunder didn't roll. But her heart felt like something just struck it clean through. Maren swallowed. She didn't know this man. Didn't understand his past. Didn't even know why he was helping her. But in that moment, she wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of what might be waiting beyond the hollow. Takoda stepped back just enough to give her space, his eyes never leaving hers. I will keep watch, he murmured. I will not sleep. You have my word? Why are you doing this for me? She whispered. The corner of his mouth lifted not a smile. Exactly, but some fragile, breaking thing. Because you looked at me without fear, he said quietly. And I have not met anyone like that in a long, long time. The night settled. The wind changed. Something unseen moved through the distant brush, and the story of their fate truly began. The hollow stayed eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that felt layered, like something was waiting in it. The moon had not yet risen, leaving the world soaked in bruised indigo darkness. Maren sat on a smooth boulder while Takoda crouched near the entrance to the hollow. Still as stone, listening to every shift in the wind, Maren wrapped her arms around herself. How can you hear something before it happens? Takoda didn't look back. Because I listened to more than sound. She swallowed. Like what? The earth. The way it changes when men with hunger in their hearts move across it. Maren felt the words in her spine, not just her ears. She watched him, the outline of his shoulders sharp against the fading sky. He didn't look tense, just impossibly aware, as if he'd been carved from the night itself. She rose slowly and stepped closer. You said they took something from you. Was it only your niece? No. His answer was quiet, rough. They took her mother as well. My sister. Maren's breath caught. I'm so sorry. Takoda stood then, finally turning toward her. His face was half shadow, half-soft glow from the last embers of a small fire he'd built. "You owe me no sympathy," he said. "I do not seek it." "Maybe not," she said, meeting his gaze, "but you deserve it." Something shifted between them, something neither of them seemed ready for. Takoda broke eye contact first. He walked past her, checking the perimeter again. She followed. "What did you mean earlier when you said I might have seen something?" He picked up a handful of cold dirt, letting it slip between his fingers. "The men who burned that ridge, they were not acting alone. Someone hired them. To do what?" "To steal a wagon." He turned his head slightly toward her. "A wagon that passed through town this morning. The one you stood near outside the telegraph office." Her eyes widened. "I wasn't even looking at it." "But you were there," he said. "And those men might believe you noticed them." Maren replayed the moment in her mind. She'd stepped back from the telegraph window to let Mrs. Harrow pass. A wagon had rolled by, canvas-covered, 2 horses pulling it. She remembered thinking nothing of it. That wagon wasn't normal? She asked. "No." He stared into the darkness. "There are rumors it carried rifles meant to start a war no one wants." Maren felt a cold ripple down her spine. Who would want that? Takoda's jaw tightened. "Someone who believes Apache blood is worth spilling." She looked at him, her heart sinking. "And you think these men followed me because they think I know who took the wagon?" "That, or they think you saw their faces clearly enough to tell the sheriff," he said. "Either way, they don't want questions." A howl rose in the distance. Not quite coyote, not quite wolf. Something off. Takoda stiffened. "They're closer." Maren's stomach twisted. "Should we hide?" "No, hiding makes prey. We make something else." He walked to a fallen juniper branch, snapping off 2 long, thin pieces. He handed one to her. "Hold this." She raised a brow. "Why?" "Because it will make you look braver than they expect." His voice softened, barely. "And fear feeds them." Maren held the branch awkwardly, but Takoda nodded approvingly. He stepped closer, his presence warm despite the cold night. "You have strength," he said. "You just don't remember you do." The words hit her harder than she expected. No one had said anything like that since her husband died. She felt her eyes sting, but she blinked it away. "What about you?" she whispered. "Do you remember yours?" Takoda didn't answer. Before she could ask more, he lifted a hand, a single sharp gesture. Maren froze. He motioned her behind a rock outcrop and she obeyed, heart hammering, footsteps, soft at first. Then heavier. The faint jingle of tack. The click of a rifle lever. Takoda crouched, his stone axe in hand. He moved like shadow, water silent, fluid, deadly calm. Maren peeked from behind the rock. 3 men approached the hollow. Not 2, 3. Their outlines were barely visible, but their voices were clear. "She was headed this way," one muttered. "Tracks show it." "Maybe she met someone," another said. "That Apache scout been wandering near the ridge all week." The third spat. "If she teamed up with him, we shoot 'em both." Maren's breath hitched. Takoda stood slowly, deliberately stepping into view like a man unafraid of death. "Looking for me?" he asked. The men froze. One lifted his rifle immediately. "You best step aside, Apache. We just want the woman." Takoda didn't blink. "If you want her, you'll have to face me first." "That ain't a problem," the man said. His rifle cocked. "That is a problem," Takoda corrected, "if you want to stay alive." The world held its breath. Maren's heart slammed against her ribs. She gripped the juniper branch so tight her nails dug into her palm. The first man fired. Takoda moved faster than she'd ever seen a man move. The bullet grazed his shoulder. She heard the rip of flesh, but he didn't falter. He darted forward, knocking the rifle aside with the blunt end of his axe handle. He swept the man's legs, sending him crashing into the dirt. The second man rushed him. Takoda twisted, slamming his elbow into the man's jaw. Bone cracked. The man went limp. The third man turned his rifle toward Maren. She froze. Takoda saw it. No. He roared. He shoved off the ground, sprinting toward her, but the rifle barrel was already centered at her chest. Maren acted without thinking. She swung the juniper branch as hard as she could, smacking the barrel upward just as the gun fired. The shot soared into the air. The man cursed and grabbed her wrist. She struggled, panic burning her throat. Then Takoda was on him. He slammed into the man with enough force to send them both rolling. Dust flew. The rifle skidded across the ground. Takoda pinned the man, gripping his collar. "Who hired you?" He snarled. The man spat blood. "I ain't saying." Takoda slammed him back into the dirt. "Who hired you?" "The Rooker gang." The man cried. "We were told to follow anyone who got near the wagon." "That's all I know, I swear it." Takoda's grip loosened just slightly. The man scrambled away, crawling backward, shaking. "We ain't getting paid enough for this. I'm done. I'm done." He ran. The others followed, dragging the unconscious man. Silence fell again, thick and unforgiving. Maren stood shaking. Takoda turned toward her, chest rising and falling hard. The bullet graze on his shoulder bled down his arm. She rushed forward. "Takoda, you're hurt. Sit down." "It's nothing," he muttered. "It's not nothing." She took his arm anyway, forcing him to sit on a flat stone. He allowed it reluctantly, his jaw tight. She tore a strip from the hem of her skirt and pressed it against the wound. He hissed through his teeth, but didn't pull away. "You saved my life," she whispered. He looked at her, then really looked. His eyes were full of something heavy and conflicted. "And you saved mine," he answered quietly. Maren felt emotion swell in her chest, too thick, too warm. Her hands trembled as she tied the fabric around his shoulder. Takoda studied her face, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "You fought," he said. "You didn't freeze." "You taught me not to," she replied. He exhaled slow, controlled, but his hand shook ever so slightly. Not from pain, but from the aftermath of a night that nearly shattered both of them. Maren sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "What happens now?" she asked. Takoda looked toward the horizon where faint gray light hinted at approaching dawn. "They won't stop," he said. "Not until the wagon is found. Not until the one who hired them is exposed. Then we find them first." Takoda's head turned toward her sharply, eyes narrowed. "Maren, no. You should go back home. Stay safe." She shook her head. "Home isn't safe. Not anymore." He opened his mouth to protest, but she placed a hand over his injured arm. "I want to stay with you," she said. Then softer, uncertain, "If you'll let me." Takoda stared at her hand, then at her face. His chest rose shakily. "Maren," he whispered, "if you stay with me, the danger will follow you." She held his gaze, then let it follow. Takoda closed his eyes for a moment, pained and moved all at once. When he opened them again, dawn touched the sky and something in him broke open. "Then stay," he murmured. "Stay with me." And the sun rose on a choice neither of them could undo. Morning light crept through the hollow like a hesitant guest, brushing over boulders, juniper branches, and the dried blood on Takoda's shoulder. Maren barely slept. Every sound in the night had felt like an approaching threat, but every time she stirred, Takoda had been awake, silent, watchful. Now he stood at the stream, washing the wound she'd wrapped. The cold water shimmered around his hands. Maren walked toward him, arms folded against the morning chill. "You didn't rest." Takoda didn't look up. "I couldn't. Because of them?" she asked. Because of you. She stopped. Me? He nodded once, water dripping from his fingers. You were frightened, and I kept listening to make sure you were still breathing. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a confession of love, but it was something. Something she didn't expect from a man who seemed carved from grief and solitude. She knelt beside him. Takoda, I'm not made of glass. I won't break. No, he said softly. But you could be taken. And that is worse. He stood, droplets tracing down the hard line of his arms. The wound on his shoulder had darkened, but he still moved like a man who ignored pain out of habit. We need to move, he said, before the Rookers return with more men. Maren nodded. Where do we go? Takoda looked toward the distant mountains. To my homeland. To my people. If we find them, we find answers. You still think what I saw connects to the stolen wagon? I do. Maren took a breath. Then let's go. Takoda hesitated, searching her face. If you come with me, there's no turning back until this ends. I know. And once my people see you, his voice lowered. They may not trust you easily. But you trust me, she said. Takoda didn't answer immediately. His eyes, dark and deep, held hers. Yes, I trust you. The words lingered in the air like smoke. He turned away before she could reply. They left the hollow and followed a narrow trail that wound through tall grass humming with morning wind. Takoda walked ahead, tracking the land like a man reading a story written in shadows. Maren followed close, her steps quiet. After an hour, the sky grew warmer, the horizon clearer. Mountains rose in the distance, blue-gray, sharp-edged, ancient. Maren exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. Tell me about your sister. Takoda's steps slowed. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice low. Her name was Nyada. She laughed more than anyone I knew, even in hard seasons. His jaw tightened slightly. She raised her daughter alone after her husband fell in battle. She was strong, stronger than me. Maren listened silently. She told me to watch over her daughter if anything ever happened, he continued, voice thickening. But I failed. You didn't fail, Maren said. Those men, they made their choices. I should have been there, he insisted. That night, I followed the sound of horses. I thought it was wild game. By the time I returned, he stopped. His shoulders tightened. He didn't finish the sentence. Maren placed a hand on his arm. Takoda, you can't blame yourself for every shadow that moves in the dark. He didn't pull away. He looked at her, something raw breaking through the mask he always wore. Then who do I blame? He whispered. She didn't answer. There was no answer. They continued walking. By midday, the sun beat down heavy and scorching. They stopped under a large boulder that cast wide shade. Maren drank from Takoda's water skin. He didn't drink until she'd finished. You're giving me too much, she said. You need more than I do, he replied. Not true. Takoda lifted a brow. You are not used to traveling this terrain, and you are? She challenged. I was raised tracking deer over these lands, he said with a small, almost teasing tone. You were not. Maren scoffed lightly. Well, thank you for the confidence. Takoda's lips twitched, a rare thing like a ghost of a smile haunting his mouth. She found herself staring, wishing he'd let it stay a moment longer. Before she could speak, he stiffened suddenly. Maren froze. What is it? He lifted his hand slowly, signaling silence. His eyes narrowed at the horizon. They followed our trail, he whispered. They're closer than I expected. Fear crawled up Maren's spine. How many? I smell 4 horses. You can smell horses? She asked, incredulous. Takoda didn't answer clearly, focused. He moved behind the boulder, pulling her with him. They crouched low. She could hear her own heart pounding. Takoda leaned close to her ear. "Whatever happens, do not run from me." She nodded, breath shaky. Hoofbeats echoed across the open land, slow at first, then increasing. Dust clouds rose in the distance, drifting like brown smoke. Then she heard voices. "Tracks go this way. Boss wants them alive. Check every damn rock." Maren gripped Takoda's arm. He gently lowered her hand, not unkindly, but firmly. "It will be all right," he whispered. "How can you be sure?" "I'm not," he murmured. "But fear will make you stumble." They waited in silence, pressed against the boulder. The horses came into view, 4 riders, rifles slung over their backs. Their eyes scanned the land like starving hawks. One rider stopped suddenly, pointing toward the boulder. Takoda inhaled sharply. Maren's breath caught. The man dismounted, walking toward them. Step by step. Boot grinding dust. Hand on his revolver. Takoda's muscles coiled. Maren could feel the tension radiating from him like heat. The rider reached the boulder's edge. Takoda moved. He lunged out, grabbing the man's gun arm, twisting it violently. The man screamed. Takoda drove his knee into the rider's chest, sending him crashing to the ground. The other riders whipped their rifles up immediately. "Takoda!" Maren cried. He yanked her behind him as gunfire shattered air. Bullets struck the boulder, splintering stone. The sound echoed like thunder. "We can't stay here!" She shouted. Takoda grabbed her hand and sprinted. They raced across the open ground, dust exploding beneath their boots. More shots fired, one grazing Maren's sleeve, tearing fabric. Takoda dragged her behind a broken wagon half buried in the earth. "We need cover!" He growled. "That is cover." She snapped back. "Not enough." The riders reloaded. Takoda peeked over the wagon edge. One bullet struck so close he jerked back. Maren grabbed his wrist. "Takoda, look!" To the north, a cluster of dead cottonwood trees formed a jagged fence. Beyond them, the ground sloped downward into a dry ravine. "If we reach those trees, they'll see us," he said, "but they'll lose sight once we drop into the ravine." She insisted. Takoda hesitated. "It's too far." "Then we run fast," she said, voice trembling but determined. He looked at her, really looked, and nodded. "Stay beside me." They sprinted again. Gunfire cracked behind them. Takoda shoved Maren forward when a bullet kicked up dirt inches from her boots. She stumbled but kept running. The cottonwoods loomed closer. Just a little more. Takoda shouted. A shot rang louder, sharper. Maren gasped as Takoda jerked violently, falling to one knee. She whirled around. "Takoda!" He grit his teeth, blood soaking through his vest near his ribs. "I'm fine," he rasped. "Keep running. I'm not leaving you." The riders were closing in. Takoda forced himself up, grabbing her wrist. "Go!" They reached the trees. The ravine's edge appeared beneath their feet, steep, jagged, but survivable. Takoda pulled her close. "Together," he whispered. They jumped. They tumbled down the rocky slope, dust and pebbles flying. Maren hit the bottom hard, coughing. Takoda landed beside her, groaning in pain but alive. The riders' horses reached the ravine edge, but they couldn't follow without risking a fall. "We lost them." One shouted. For the first time in hours, Takoda let out a shaking breath. Maren crawled to him quickly. "You're bleeding badly, Takoda. You need help." He leaned back against a stone, closing his eyes. "I've survived worse." She touched his cheek, forcing him to look at her. "Not without help." He opened his eyes, dark, tired, vulnerable. "Maren." He swallowed, pain flickering in his gaze. "I'm glad. You stayed." She held his face in her hands. "I'm not going anywhere." Takoda exhaled shakily and rested his forehead against hers. In that quiet ravine, danger above them, fear behind them, and uncertainty ahead, something undeniable passed between them. Not a promise, not a confession, but the beginning of both. The ravine stayed silent long after the hoofbeats faded into the distance. Dust settled slowly, drifting like pale smoke in the slanted afternoon sun. Takoda lay half-sitting against the stone wall, his breath uneven, one hand pressed to the fresh wound near his ribs. Maren knelt beside him, torn between panic and the fierce, iron determination that had taken root in her chest ever since she decided not to leave him. "We need to stop the bleeding," she whispered. Takoda winced as she peeled back the soaked cloth. "It will slow on its own." "It won't," she said. "Not unless we do something about it." Maren tore more fabric from her underskirt and folded it tightly. She pressed it against the wound. Takoda hissed through his teeth but didn't push her away. "You're stubborn," he muttered. "Then that makes two of us." His lips twitched, the faintest shadow of a smile fighting through pain. "You don't fear me anymore." "I never did," she said. He raised a brow. "You were cautious. Cautious isn't the same as afraid." She tied the cloth firmly around him, her hands trembling only when he couldn't see. She could feel his body heat radiating through her fingertips, the tension in his muscles, the way he watched her with an intensity she didn't quite understand. Takoda breathed shallowly. "We cannot stay here. You can't keep moving in this condition." "Maren." He tried to sit straighter, but pain caught him like a hook. He gritted his teeth. "If the rookers circle back, this ravine becomes a trap." She looked up at the jagged walls surrounding them. He was right. They needed somewhere hidden and fast. "There's an old miner's shelter north of here," Maren said suddenly. "A cabin. Abandoned for years." Takoda blinked. "You know this land better than you say." "I know enough to keep us alive." Takoda nodded slightly. "Help me stand." She slid her arm under his, pulling him up. He staggered, leaning heavily on her, but stood. The closeness sent a flutter through Maren's chest she wasn't expecting, but she forced her voice steady. "It's not far." "We walk slow." They began the climb out of the ravine. Maren went first, testing the footholds, Takoda following with labored breaths. Several times he slipped, but she braced him, refusing to let him fall. When they finally reached the top, the world stretched wide before them, rolling hills, scattered cottonwoods, a blue sky slowly bruising toward evening. The sunlight caught Takoda's sweat-dampened hair, making it shine like obsidian. "You're pale," Maren said softly. "You worry too much. You bleed too much." The corner of his mouth twitched again. "Fair." They moved north, keeping low behind shrubs and boulders. While Takoda walked with the determination of a man who refused to die here, Maren could feel him weakening with each step. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in strokes of gold and rust. The structure leaned crookedly against the hillside, half swallowed by wild sage, its roof sagging but still intact. Takoda eyed it. "This is shelter?" "Better than a ravine where bullets can find us," she said. Inside, dust lay thick over everything, but the walls were solid, the door heavy enough to bar if needed. Maren helped Takoda lie down on a blanket left long ago by some forgotten miner. His breath shuddered. "You have saved my life twice today." "Well," she whispered, brushing a leaf from his cheek, "you saved mine first." He looked at her, really looked, his eyes softer now, stripped of all the hard edges he used to keep the world out. "Maren." The way he said her name felt like its own confession, but she pulled her gaze away quickly. "I need to heat water." "Clean the wound." She found an old iron pot and stepped outside to gather snow from the drift behind the cabin. When she returned, Takoda had propped himself on one elbow. watching her with a stubborn glint. "You shook earlier," he said. She paused. "When?" "When the bullet passed near you." Maren exhaled. "I was scared. Anyone would be. You still ran with me." "You ran for me first," she whispered. "I wasn't letting you die." Takoda's eyes darkened with something unreadable. "You speak as if my life matters more than yours." "It doesn't," she said softly. "But it matters to me." He inhaled sharply, a flicker of emotion crossing his face before he dropped his gaze. "Then I am honored." She stepped closer, kneeling beside him. "Hold still." The warm water cleaned the wound, but he clenched his jaw at every touch. Maren knew he was fighting the urge to pretend he didn't feel pain. She didn't let him. "Don't be brave for me," she said. "Just be honest." Takoda lifted his eyes, meeting hers. "It hurts." She nodded. "Good, that means you're alive." For the first time since she met him, he laughed, quiet, short, but real. The sound startled her. It was rich and rough, like he'd forgotten how to make it and had to learn again. Night descended, the cabin growing colder. Maren gathered old wood, lit a small fire, and sat beside him. Takoda watched the flames dance. "My people. They may already know about the stolen wagon. Then they know someone is trying to start something terrible." "Yes," he said. "War, fear, bloodshed." Maren shook her head. "Whoever hired the rookers, why involve us?" "Because you were seen near the wagon," he answered. "And I was seen near you. They assumed we were working together. We weren't." Takoda looked at her with a softness that unsettled her chest. "We are now." A beat passed. Long enough for the truth to settle. Maren reached for his hand, hesitating only a second before her fingers brushed his. He didn't pull away. He turned his palm up, letting her hold it fully. "Takoda," she whispered. "When this is over, what happens? What do you want to happen?" She swallowed. "I want to see you safe. I want your people to know you fought for them. I want you to find peace. And you?" He murmured. She blinked. "What about me?" He shifted, lifting her hand to his chest. "You deserve more than running from bullets and hiding in shadows." She tried to smile, but her heart felt too full. "Maybe I do. But for now, I only want to be where you are." Takoda's hand tightened gently around hers. "Then you will be." Before they could say more, a soft crunch sounded outside. Maren stiffened. Takoda's posture changed instantly, alert, listening. A shadow moved past the small cabin window. Takoda whispered, "Stay behind me." "No," she whispered fiercely. "Not again." He almost smiled. "You argue too much, and you get shot too much." He reached for his axe, grimacing as he stood. Maren grabbed a rusted pickaxe from the corner of the cabin. Clutching it awkwardly but firmly, the footsteps grew closer. Takoda stepped toward the door. It swung open. The firelight flickered over 3 figures tall, silent, wrapped in traditional Apache clothing. Their eyes found Takoda immediately. The man in front stepped forward. "Takoda," he said in Apache, voice deep and steady. "You live." Takoda breathed out in relief. "Kohana." Maren lowered her makeshift weapon, but didn't move. The man's gaze slid to her, hard, assessing, not unkind, but wary. Takoda spoke in English for her sake. "This is Kohana, my uncle." Kohana's expression softened by a threat. "You travel with a settler woman." Takoda nodded once. "She saved my life." Kohana's eyes sharpened. "And she carries fear, but no lies." Maren stepped forward carefully. "We're not your enemies." Kohana looked at her a long moment. Then he turned to Takoda. "We found the wagon, the rifles, the men who hired the rookers." Takoda's jaw tightened. "Who?" Kohana's face darkened. A rancher named Harlan Creed. He means to sell the weapons to those who wish for war. Maren's stomach dropped. Creed owns half the land around my town. Kohana nodded grimly. He plans to use you, Maren, to claim he saw you with Apache scouts. To stir fear. Takoda's eyes burned with fury. We end this. Kohana nodded. We ride tonight. Maren looked between them, heart pounding. And me? Takoda turned to her, stepping close, his hand finding hers again. You ride with me, he said. If you choose? She looked into his dark, unwavering eyes and knew the choice had already been made long before now. I choose you, she said. Takoda's breath trembled not from pain, but from something deeper. He squeezed her hand. Then, whatever comes, we face it together. Kohana stepped aside, motioning them out into the moonlit night. Maren took Takoda's arm, bracing him as he walked out above them. The stars burned bright and fierce across the sky, like sparks from a future neither of them had dared dream. Not a lonely journey, not a life of running, but something shared, something chosen. And as they mounted the waiting horses and rode into the dark with Kohana's warriors, Maren felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope and the quiet, steady beginning of love, the kind born not from safety, but from surviving the fire together.